Stage 3. Let me think. What was stage 3? What was stage 3? Stage 3. Stage 3 was so exciting, I can't even remember what stage 3 was.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. This is a show about guns, hunting, competition, self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 79, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee, cooksholsters.com. Welcome to the show. We are on the road in my home state of North Carolina. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the Armed Lutheran family is here visiting our family and friends. We haven't seen, we're staying in my grandparents' house, the home where my mom grew up, originally built by my grandfather over 100 years ago, now renovated into sort of a family bed and breakfast by my mom and her late husband. The vacation got off to just a fabulous start. The car rental fell through, so we had to change gears, pack my car. 5 of us packed into a VW Passat, so a lot of the things that I planned to bring, books and videos that I hope to catch up on, got left behind to make room. So did rain gear, which was important for the North Carolina State IDPA Championship, which I shot 2 days after we arrived, and it rained a little bit, and I didn't have any rain gear, had to run out the night before and replace it. We left North Texas about 7 o'clock Wednesday evening, and about 2:30 in the morning in central Arkansas, just west of Forest City, one of the tires blew. I knew the tires needed replacing, hadn't planned on replacing them until after vacation when we got back, because I wasn't planning on taking the car in the first place, and so everything got changed at the last minute. So we had a flat 2:30 in the morning. My son and I get out, and we unloaded all of the luggage from the trunk right there on the side of the road in the dark. We got mauled by pesky man-eating mosquitoes, and wrangled the spare tire onto the car, reloaded all the luggage, and then limped at 50 miles an hour to Forest City. Got a hotel room and slept in our clothes for about 3 hours. Got up and waited at the nearby Walmart service center for about 2.5 hours to get the tire. I just went ahead and got all 4 tires changed to be safe. And then we got back on our way. So our 16-hour trip turned into 26, and we lost a good portion of the day on Thursday. We had intended to get to North Carolina mid-morning, early, around lunchtime Thursday, and ended up getting here that evening and sleeping for about 12 hours to make up for all the lost sleep. I mentioned that podcasting was going to be tough during this trip. I had no idea. Internet service here is just awful, and so is my cell service. I've been running on 2 bars the whole time, so I managed to get a couple of pictures uploaded to Facebook and a couple of things on Instagram, but the idea of actually posting a podcast was just completely out of the question, and I finally had to make the call and decide that episodes 79 and 80 were simply not going to happen until we got back to Texas. My mom's got Wi-Fi, but not in this house that we're staying in, and the Wi-Fi she's got is a Verizon hotspot, so it's not really any better than using my phone as a hotspot. It's more reliable than and less hassle than dealing with her old provider, Frontier, but it's slow. And I just knew after noodling around with this for a couple hours that there was just no way that I was going to get this uploaded, so I just made the call that I would delay the release of these 2 episodes rather than go drive into town, sit at McDonald's to have enough bandwidth to upload anything. Here on what used to be my grandparents' farm, it's an old dairy farm, used to be quite a bit larger than it is now. My mom sold about half the property some years ago, and so it's not quite what it used to be, but I used to run around these woods with friends playing Army. Today we worry about our kids going down the street to visit with friends in our neighborhood. When I was little, and we were wandering around for miles in the woods, out of sight, out of earshot, no leaving an address or phone number on the fridge. There were no cell phones, and somehow, by the grace of God, we survived. It's amazing how things have changed. It was here that, I was given my first real gun as a boy, the Marlin 60 .22 rifle that I still own and have taught both of my children to shoot on. I'd take boxes of ammo, and I'd take the gun and roam around the back 40, plinking at targets and toy soldiers, and using rat shot to drive off the stray dogs and cats who would come steal food from our pets. And I went squirrel hunting with my best friend and his grandpa in the woods. I never saw any squirrels, but I went, and somehow we survived without all that helicopter parenting that goes on nowadays. By the time you hear this, I will have completed the North Carolina State IDPA Championship at the Watauga Gun Club in Boone, North Carolina. It's about an hour and a half up the mountain from where I am currently staying. Boone, for those unfamiliar with North Carolina geography, is the home to Appalachian State University. My first sanctioned match ever was the North Carolina State match at Watauga Gun Club in 2013. So it's kind of a homecoming there as well. I took first place ESP novice in that match, so basically I was the best of the least talented. So here I am returning 4 years later as an SSP marksman, having not improved all that much, at least in terms of my classification. I feel like I've improved tremendously since then. I'm very much a different person, different shooter. The forecast was calling for thunderstorms, just like back in 2013 when it rained on and off all day and we got drenched. My son Reagan went with me, and we spent all day dodging the rain and the heat. And like I said, I left all my rain gear in Texas to make room for everybody in the car, so I had to run out to Walmart and grab something to keep me dry. But I'll have details about the match later in the show. Had a lot of fun, finished 5th place in my division out of 19. Could have been better. It kind of threw the whole thing away in the last on the last stage of the day. But again, more details on that later in the show. Today, we've got long-awaited segments from our contributors. I had these ready and raring to go a couple of weeks ago right before we left. Mia's got a segment about how your range time can improve your hunting. Sergeant Bill's got tips to improve your strong hand only shooting. And next episode 80, he'll be talking about weak hand only shooting. I probably should have listened to that segment before shooting the North Carolina State match. More about that later. Aaron Israel shares 5 tips to consider before you buy your next gun. All that is straight ahead. Stick around and enjoy this Tarheel road trip edition of Armed Lutheran Radio coming up right after this.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. As I mentioned earlier, we are on the road in North Carolina this week, visiting family in North Carolina, and while I was here, I decided I would take part in the 2017 Mountaineer Classic State Championship at the Watauga Gun Club in Boone, North Carolina. To make space in my car for the trip to Texas, we had to leave lots of stuff behind, things that I had initially planned to bring and things that I typically keep in the car all the time. A folding chair and rain gear. They ended up in the garage back in Texas, and it turned out I would need both for this match. The weather forecast called for a high in the upper 70s with rain on and off throughout the day, so I ended up running to Walmart the night before the match here in Marion, North Carolina, grabbed a rain jacket made by Frog Togs, one that was supposedly breathable and waterproof. I suppose it's only breathable in that you can breathe while you're wearing it, because it was not very comfortable to wear, and I would, after putting it on for a few minutes, I would rather have just stood in the rain than sat there and soaked in my own sweat. I got up at 5 a.m., got ready, loaded the car, and to top it all off, I forgot water and energy drinks. As I headed up the mountain, I remembered it was too late to go back. Like the folding chair and the rain jacket, I ended up needing both. It was mostly cloudy. I mean, we kind of dodged the bullet for most of the day. The weather was really pretty comfortable. It was cloudy and cool. The rain held off for the most part. It drizzled a couple of times, very briefly. Never came the downpour or the thunderstorms that were expected. The summer heat did make a couple of brief appearances. Nothing like 2013 when it just was unbearably hot. The heat disappeared just as quickly as the rain did. The breeze blew through that valley where the range is, and it really kept everything comfortable for most of the day. My squad was Squad 6. We started out on Stage 6, and I was grouped with a bunch of shooters from the Central Carolina Shooters Club, and most of them from South Carolina. Really great people. At first, it appeared we were going to get to shoot with Morgan Allen, and his friends apparently are members of my squad for that match. And I think that's why Morgan seemed to think that he was supposed to be with us, but he finally, unfortunately, before we got started shooting, figured out that he was supposed to be on Squad 5, and he took his leave of us and went on to shoot. I only got to see him shoot one time, and that was because Stages 5 and 6 were in the same bay, and we did that thing where one squad shoots, and then the other squad shoots, and then everybody goes forward to paste and score, which was a real pain in the butt, let me tell you. More on that in a minute. In every bay, this was a novel idea that really didn't pan out because they didn't plan it very well. They decided they would start with a warm-up stage. They called it Stage 11. Every bay, every squad was going to start with Stage 11. And it was basically one target at 12 or 13 yards, and you downloaded your magazine to 6 rounds. At the buzzer, you drew the gun, 6 shots to the body, slide lock reload, and then 3 shots to the head, limited. Unfortunately, they couldn't seem to figure out or agree how to score this. So what if somebody, and I'm hearing this all secondhand from people who talk to people who talk to people. So this is what I heard, that they could not agree on how to score those targets. And because there was disagreement and because different stages, different SOs were scoring those differently, they threw the whole stage out. So it ended up being an unscored warm-up to begin the match. Stage 6 and Stage 5, which were right next to each other in the same bay and should not have been, were one-handed stages. I had never seen this before, and I hope I never see this again. Basically, Stage 5 was a left-handed stage, and Stage 6 was a right-handed stage. And by this, I mean you could only use your left hand or your right hand, and you shot the whole stage with that hand. 18 rounds, 9 targets, but you basically started, they were called precious cargo, and you were carrying this precious cargo in either your right hand or your left hand and shooting with the other hand the whole stage. And in between, of course, you had to perform a reload or several reloads depending on what division you were in. And having to do this with something in your opposite hand meant you had to set this thing down. And this precious cargo, which I assumed from the stage description that was released before the match, I assumed it was going to be something like a baby carrier. Turned out it was just a pail of kitty litter. Stage 10 was a tree stand stage, and you were up off the ground about 10 feet, and you started facing uprange, and at the buzzer you turned, and there were 3 windows, one on the left, one on the right, and one in the middle. And you were supposed to engage the targets from the middle window first. And then you could go to either the left or the right after that, your choice. From the middle window, you had 2 targets, 2 paper targets with a popper in between. And when you hit the popper, the targets flipped and became non-threats. So they disappeared. So you didn't want to shoot the steel first, or you wouldn't have time to engage the paper targets. Now, I joked with the SO because he said, no, but you could do that, but nobody's tried it yet. And I kind of joked that, if Sergeant Bill was here, he would take you up on that bet. You shot the 2 paper, two shots each, then the steel. Then you could go to one of the windows on the left or the right. And from the windows left and right, you had steel, which activated a swinging non-threat. And then there were 2 paper targets, which were partially obscured by the swinging non-threat. And the non-threats in North Carolina these are some of the slowest non-threats I think I've ever seen. They were basically like, hey, how y'all doing? And they just sort of waved at you very slowly. So I had time to hit steel 2 on the paper before the non-threat even moved. And then by the time it had moved and covered the first paper target, I shot twice on the paper. So it was that fast. I was fast enough to be able to do that before the non-threat even made one swing back and forth. That's just not telling you how fast I am. That's telling you how slow the non-threats were. I finished that stage 7 down, which I felt really good about, and we went to lunch. Stage 1 was manned by the man that I credit with kind of sparking my interest in IDPA only because it was his club where I got started. The Mecklenburg Wildlife Defensive Shooters, Bruce Hurt, he was the SO on this stage, and it was kind of fitting that right after lunch, we were doing a stage where you start out sitting in an outhouse. So you have to pull a rope, which it does 2 things. It releases a weight which opens the door and activates a up-down disappearing target. One of the problems, and this was something that Bruce Hurt warned everybody, was if you don't pull the rope hard enough, and it was basically the rope ran underneath the seat and came up through a hole through a pipe behind you. And if you didn't pull it hard enough, the door might not open. And his warning to us was, if the door doesn't open, pull the rope again because you didn't pull it hard enough. And I'm not stopping and giving you a reshoot because you didn't pull the rope hard enough. Well, one of the shooters in the squad, unfortunately, I felt horrible for the guy. He pulled the rope and then let it go. Basically, the rope was attached to a piece of pipe, a piece of PVC. And so he's sitting on the toilet, basically fishing around behind himself with his hand, trying to find the rope again, which had fallen under the toilet lid, and he could not find it. It took him forever to find the rope again and to pull it. And maybe 10 seconds had passed. He finally got the rope. He pulled it again. The door opened. And by this time, as you probably know, and I have experienced this myself, whenever you make a mistake that costs you time, your brain says, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, to try to make up for it. And he started hurrying, and he started making mistakes. And it cost him his whole match was probably blown in that one stage. I felt horrible for the guy, but it was a tough stage, but it was fun. And again, fitting that you would be doing that immediately after lunch. Going into stage 5, we had a lot of time. There was a little bit of a wait at stage 2, a little longer wait at stage 3, an even longer wait at stage 4, and then finally we waited almost an hour before we got to shoot stage 5. And during that time, it got hot. The sun came out a little bit, had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to have the muscles sort of tighten up. Did not have a folding chair like I mentioned, so I wasn't comfortable. I was either on my feet the whole time or sitting on the ground. And finally, when it came time to shoot, again, it was, like I mentioned before, this was stage 5, which is the left-hand only stage, and it was in the same bay with stage 6. So after waiting an hour, we got to shoot a stage that was in a bay being shared with another squad, and we were going back and forth, one squad after the other. Shoot, then go forward, and paste and score. And at one point, and here it was nearly 7 o'clock in the evening, and we started shooting at 9 o'clock that morning, I hear 2 of the SOs say to each other, this probably would have been better if we had put them in separate bays. Yeah, glad you figured that out already, 12 hours later. And then they were trying to rush us through because we were running out of daylight, because that part of the range is sort of under the tree line. And so the way the sun was setting, it was getting a little darker, and we wanted to get finished. It was 7 o'clock, and everybody else, except for our 2 squads, everyone else had already gone to dinner. So after sitting for an hour and being tired and unfocused and really ready to be finished, and then being rushed through the stage, I completely fell apart. I had no focus, and you can see it in the video. The posture is different. It's that kind of tired, standing upright, letting the gun push me around. I had calculated going into this stage that through the first 9 stages, I was 4.2 points down per stage. So I was in good shape. I was in really good shape. And looking at the scores at the end, I was probably in position to finish top 3. But I ended up 13 down on that last stage, and I hit 4 non-threats. The only non-threats I hit all day were on the stages 5 and 6. I started the day with a non-threat, shooting strong hand only. I finished the day with 4 non-threats, shooting weak hand only. Final time, I was 2 seconds out of 4th place. I was 16 seconds out of 3rd. The 20 seconds that I lost on non-threats on that last stage cost me 3rd place. It was a disappointing finish to what had been a good day. I met some really great, saw some great people that I had not seen since the 2013 match. Was squatted with just some fantastic people, really good people. Really enjoyed shooting with them and spending the day with them. And had a good time, even though the finish was not as good as I had hoped it would be. But so any lessons coming out of this match? Make sure you pack your rain gear. Make sure that you pack a folding chair. Don't forget your water. Practice shooting weak hand only. You never know when you might run into it. It's a good skill to have, whether you're going to run into it at a match or not. Expand your training beyond just stand and deliver with your weak hand or your strong hand only. All right, that's going to do it from here. More to come right after this, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio. As many of you know, you'll likely have to win 2 fights if you have to use your gun in self-defense. The first fight is the gunfight itself. The second is the fight to clear your good name through the legal system. Even if you do everything right, you can still be prosecuted, which can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Armed Lutheran Radio is proud to partner with the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, and while they can't completely take away that worry, they can give you the peace of mind knowing that you've got the financial and legal assistance you need to win this new fight. Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network can help. Go to my website, armedlutheranradio.us, look for the coupon code on the right-hand side in the sidebar, and sign up for Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network protection and save $25 off your first year of membership at armedcitizensnetwork.org. Join me, Pastor Bennett, Paul Lathrop, and thousands of American gun owners who trust Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. armedcitizensnetwork.org.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about 5 things that you ought to do before you buy your next gun. Now, being that this is Armed Lutheran Radio, a lot of us are probably thinking about what our next gun purchase is going to be. Maybe you've already got a safe full of guns and you're ready to add one more to it because you can never have too many guns. I'm fully in agreement with that. But here are 5 things that you ought to put on your list in the next 12 months before you buy your gun. If you knock out all of them in the next 12 months before you buy another gun, then your priorities are right on point. If you only get to a few of them, then your priorities are probably okay. If you don't get to any of them, though, then you probably need to reassess why you own guns and where you really are as far as personal defense goes. The first thing I'm going to tell you is going to be no surprise to those of you who listen to this show every week. Buy a medical kit and get some medical training. Number one priority you ought to have. If you don't have a medical kit and you've never been to a medical class, and I'm not talking just CPR, I'm not talking just how to put on a Band-Aid, I'm not talking the stuff that your work makes you go through if you have to go out in the field. I'm talking about how to stop a traumatic bleed and deal with somebody who's got a serious gunshot wound type situation going on. You know how to apply a tourniquet, how to apply a pressure dressing, how to use quick clot, all of those things. Get yourself to a good one-day medical training class and learn how to use that basic the gunshot treatment kit. If you haven't been to one of those things, that needs to be at the top of your list. Second thing, sign up for a defensive shooting class. Obviously, I'm a little biased here since I teach defensive shooting, which is why I'm giving you these tips. But if you haven't been to a good defensive shooting class, or if you've been to one and it's been a while since you've gone back and gotten a refresher, or maybe you want to expand your horizons and go see another instructor, make that a priority in the next 12 months. Before you buy your next gun, go out and get yourself to a defensive shooting class. And if you say you can't afford it, I don't believe you if you're thinking about buying that next gun. Maybe you need to sell one and get to a class. But that ought to be priority number 2, is sign up for a defensive shooting class and get out to that. And if you've already been to a lot of defensive shooting classes, maybe you've already knocked that off, maybe in place of that, at number 2, you could get to a legal class. There's a lot of good legal classes from guys like Masad Ayub and Andrew Bronca that can teach you about what actually happens in the courtroom when people have to go and stand before a jury of their peers. That's all good information to have. Way more important than knowing how to shoot, in my opinion. So get to one of those classes, either defensive shooting or legal stuff. Make that a priority right behind getting that medical training. The next thing, read a book. Read a book. If you're not reading about defensive shooting, then you got a problem. And I don't care, maybe you're just a competitive guy. You're not thinking a lot about self-defense. You want to learn more about competition. There's great books out there about competition. Guys like Michael Seeklander have written books about how to train for competition. Get out there and read some books. On the defensive shooting side, check out Rob Pincus's stuff, Counter Ambush, Combat Focused Shooting, the books that we base my curriculum off of. You can also check out Seeklander's got a really good book on defensive shooting as well that kind of complements well with his competitive shooting book. You can also read about the legal stuff. Read Masad Ayub's book, Deadly Force. Read Andrew Bronca's Law of Self-Defense. Get in there and read about the things that are priorities to you, which, whether it's self-defense or competition, maybe read a couple of books, but at least get in the books, at least one book in the next 12 months before you buy your next gun. And fourth, check out your home security plan. A lot of people own guns, but when I find out that they don't have a lot of other things set up as far as home security, that makes me think that maybe their priorities are a little bit out of whack. Have you checked the bolts in your deadbolt? Do they go all the way into the studs? Are they those nice 3-inch long bolts that go all the way into the frame of the door and don't just get stuck right there with those little 1-inch things that the builders put in? Have you checked to make sure that your deadbolts are reinforced at the back plate and in the door? That's a simple home defense thing that a lot of people simply overlook. Are your bushes trimmed? Do you have the bushes out of the way of your windows so that you can see out to the street if your house is close enough to see out to the street? Are there any obstructions where people could hide close to your house if they wanted to peep and see if you're home? If you've got a little bit of extra money, Maybe instead of buying a gun, maybe you put a camera on your doorbell. They make those little doorbell cameras. I installed one recently that's really helpful. You shouldn't be answering the door to anybody that you don't know, and using that doorbell camera is a good way to deal with solicitors and make sure that you know who's talking. And even when you're out of town, you can get an app on your phone that lets you know, hey, there's somebody at your front door, and you can talk to him right there from your phone. So if you haven't looked into stuff like that, get it. You want to spend a little bit more money, get a home security system, get cameras all over the place, get an alarm system that's real high-tech and sophisticated. They're not that expensive nowadays. Look into that. So if you got a lot of guns, but you haven't done the basic things to secure your home, like checking the bolts in your deadbolts, securing your area with an alarm system, and making sure your bushes are trimmed so you can see out to the road, then I would look at those things. That ought to be a priority for you. Last but not least, get out to a shooting match. If you have a lot of guns and you never shoot them, you're never going to get better with them. One of the best ways you can test your marksmanship ability and have a good time is to go out, shoot IDPA USPSA. Sergeant Bill, myself, and Lloyd, and a lot of other people that are involved with the Armed Lutheran Radio show shoot IDPA regularly. It's a great time. Now, you know that I've talked about it not being adequate for self-defense preparation, and that's fine. You can take it for playing the game that it is, but it's a fun game to play. Get out there and shoot a match. I'm going to be shooting a steel match this Sunday. It's a good time with my friends. We're going to link up, go shoot the steel match, and then go have some dinner afterwards. So it's a good reason to get out there and interact with other gun owners and put your skills to the test. So get out there and shoot a match. So there's 5 things you ought to do before you buy your next gun. Buy a med kit, get medical training, sign up for a defensive shooting or legal defense class, read a book, whether it's about competition or the legal aspects of self-defense or how to shoot. Get out there and check your home security plan. Make sure all the stuff that's basic is squared away before you buy your next gun. And then last but not least, get out to a match and test your skills. And if you do a couple of those things, maybe 2 or 3 of them before you buy your next gun, then I'm going to call your priorities in the right place. You don't do any of them, then you probably need to reassess where you're at. And that's your personal defense tip for the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a personal defense network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
The percentage of women who own guns is growing. American women are more knowledgeable and better equipped to defend themselves than ever before. So, why is it that every time I go to a gun shop, I feel like they're talking down to me? Like, hey little lady, let me show you what you need. It's like all they want to do is sell me a pink gun. If you're tired of feeling that too, visit Guns for Gals, a specialty firearms boutique designed to empower women with information about firearm safety and to equip them with the means to protect themselves. The owners go out of their way to find products specifically for women, and they actually listen and ask questions to help you find the right products to meet your needs. If they wouldn't own it themselves, they won't sell it. Guns for Gals is located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. Open Monday 1 to 6 and Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7. And on weekends, you can find them at a gun show near you. Or shop online at www.gunsforgals.com. Guns for Gals, more than just a gun shop. It's how gun shopping should be.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hey guys, hello there. Oh my goodness, it is definitely summertime. It is so hot out there. And I know I live up in the mountains in Colorado, a little bit cooler here than probably a lot of parts of the country, but regardless, it is hot. We actually were at the range with my daughter the other day, and I felt so bad for her out there shooting trap because, as you know, if you shoot shotgun leagues, you are out there on the concrete with the sun just blazing down on you. So with these hot summertime temperatures, you might be surprised that some of us already have our sights focused on waterfowl and upland hunts. There are those that are out there shooting summertime leagues at the shotgun range, and then there's others who are booking their fall and winter hunts. So I'm one of those. I'm out booking my hunts, and I also am making plans. I personally don't shoot a lot of competitions and leagues. My daughter's the one who does that, and that's probably because I don't do very well shooting clays, so it's a little disappointing and I guess kind of a waste of ammo. I mean, that's a lot of shells to go through to not hit half the targets. I might be exaggerating on that, but some days I'm not, truly. Anyways, I wanted to encourage you guys to get out to the range. I know many of you shoot handguns, and guess what? You can hunt with handguns too. And those of you that shoot 3-gun, you can hunt with those carbines also. Get out to the range and practice this summer. Try to do it earlier in the day before temperatures get too hot so that you don't get heat stroke and have any bad scenarios out there. Definitely stay hydrated. Get out there before it's too hot. But one thing how the range can help us with our hunts is it helps with muscle memory. It helps us learn about our firearm, helps us learn how to maneuver and how to swing our shotguns, how to move our handguns, and how to shoot. So those are ways that you can actually get prepared for the upcoming hunting seasons. If you want to learn more about that, you can read my most recent article at the Beretta blog, and the address is blog.beretta.com. My most recent article is 5 ways the shooting range helps with hunting. I hope that you'll head over there, check it out, and get out there to the range, get practicing, get those muscles in shape for the coming hunts. Have a great one, and I'll chat with you next week. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
As many of you know, Sergeant Bill and I are competitive shooters. We're also reloaders. Bill helped me to get started last year, but I've still got a lot to learn. One thing I do know, though, you need a good source for supplies and components. So let me tell you about U.S. Reloading Supply. Yeah, there are bigger suppliers out there, but what sets U.S. Reloading Supply apart from the rest is their dedication to customer satisfaction. Check them out at usreloadingsupply.com. They carry the top name brands like Starline, Rainier, Barry's, Remington, Spear, and Hornady. If you've got a special order like primers and powder that you don't see on their website, give them a call for a quote. I did and got a great price. Excellent customer service, fast delivery, prices that include shipping, and a promise to match or beat any retailer's price, including shipping. Call them today, 941-451-7357, or visit them today at usreloadingsupply.com and use the promo code Lutheran2017 to save 10% off your order. usreloadingsupply.com.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today I'm going to talk about SHO, or strong hand only shooting. Okay, so with strong hand only shooting, you're going to have more felt recoil. The gun's going to recoil more in your hand, and it's going to recoil towards the open side of the grip where your sport hand would be if it was freestyle shooting. Now, a quick little tip about strong hand shooting. Since the gun's going to recoil in towards the other hand that's not there, when you're shooting multiple targets in an array, strong hand only, or even weak hand only, the smart technique is to actually ride the recoil in towards the next target. So if you're right-handed, you're shooting right hand only, the gun's going to recoil towards the left, so shoot your target array from right to left so that you're not fighting the recoil going the other direction. You just kind of ride it to the next target. Okay, one of the most common techniques out there is what I call the angle technique. You'll see the shooter that'll stand, he'll blade his body to the side, he'll put his strong hand arm forward, and angling his body back into and behind the firing gun, and also have his feet bladed. So it almost kind of look like a classical one-handed fencing position if you've seen any old Zorro movies. Sometimes they'll even cant the gun at a slight angle because it follows the natural rotation of your forearm bones or something like that. And you'll also see that they'll lean into the gun, using that as recoil control. This is a very common technique for like bullseye pistol shooters because they've got the entire body lined up, or even Olympic shooters because their entire body's lined up behind the gun. They'll have, their eye right down the sights of the gun, their body all lined up behind it. And those guys use it for slow, accurate, perfect shooting. What we're doing in practical sports is trying to be as efficient and quick as possible while still being accurate. Now, I used to use that angle technique, But what I have started doing for my technique is I actually square up my shoulders and my stance just like I'm shooting freestyle shooting. Now, being a lefty, my right foot's a little bit forward of my left foot, but, I'm pretty much squared up. My shoulders are pretty squared. My hips are squared up. I'll have a slight turn to my upper body and my shoulders behind the gun. I'll use my normal freestyle slight forward lean from the waist forward to kind of get behind the gun for recoil. And I use either little or no cant to the gun at all. Most of the time, I'll shoot it straight up and down. That way, the sights are in perfect relation to what I'm used to seeing. You start canting the gun, the sights go to the side of the gun. You start changing your point of aim, point of impact. It gets a little weird, so I try not to cant the gun very much. What I found is I shoot pretty much just as well as I do if I was doing that angle technique, and there's less movement of the feet and body and shoulders. Then I don't have to, drop my weak hand off and then change my feet, change my body, change my shoulders, get behind the gun just to shoot. I'm still in the position that I was already in shooting freestyle. I've just taken one hand away from the gun. And it's easier to go from shooting freestyle to shooting strong hand only by leaving the gun pretty much where you were, with just barely turning your shoulders a little bit so that the gun's a little bit more in line with your eye than normal freestyle. But it's very similar to your freestyle position, and it's quick. There's not a lot of changes. Now I'll take my weak hand and I kind of hold it into my chest with my, not a strong fist, but I close my hand and I hold it into my chest, which kind of gives you somewhere to put your hand, and it's close to where you need it if you need to go back to freestyle or doing a reload or anything. It's not dangling out at your side or hanging out or doing any weird stuff. So that's how I found the best way to do it. And like I said before, it's faster, it's quicker. I shoot just as accurately, but everything's quicker going from freestyle to strong hand only, or doing reloads or any of the things that I need to in any of the practical shooting sports. But don't just take my word for it. Try it out in dry fire, and then take it to the range and try it out. See if it works for you. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
Having a good holster is absolutely critical if you're going to carry a firearm for self-defense. If you need a quality holster, let me recommend Cook's Holsters. I've found Cook's Holsters in the pre-podcast days when I bought a Cook's IWB holster to write a review, and I did a lot of Kydex holster reviews back in those blogging days. But I liked that holster from Cook's Holsters so much that I applied to become an official Cook's Holsters dealer. Cook's Holsters are American-made in the great state of Georgia. They are custom molded to fit your firearm. The advantage of Kydex over other materials is that it holds its shape. It doesn't stretch. It doesn't lose retention. It won't wear on the finish of your firearm the way leather will, for example. They're available for hundreds of gun models. They're in dozens of color combinations and different printed patterns and camouflage. They're great for concealed carry, for range work, for competition. They come with a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out today, www.cooksholsters.com, or visit the Armed Lutheran shop at armedlutheran.us/shop. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST to save 10% off of your order. And make sure you've got a quality holster and don't settle for anything less. Go to cooksholsters.com today. Welcome back to this road trip edition of Armed Lutheran Radio. As I mentioned several episodes back, I've been out to the range with my church shooting club, and I promised to talk about that experience and how we set it up. I got a request from a listener for details, so I thought I'd share that info with you in case you would like to set something similar up with your church. First, make sure that you've put together a waiver, have a lawyer look it over, make sure that every participant signs it. The waiver needs to protect the church, its officers, and employees and other members of the shooting club from any liability in case of an accident or injury. So that is first and foremost. Make sure that the church and all of its officers and employees are protected, even if this is not really an officially sanctioned club. Even if this is just members of the church who get together to go shoot as a group, and it's something that you announce at church. Like in our case, we have the St. John Lutheran Church Shooting Club. It's not an officially sponsored function or mission of the church. It's something that members, we get together and we go shoot. Just to be safe, I would recommend that you make sure that you have a waiver that indemnifies the church from any potential liability. Second, pick a place and make arrangements with the manager or the owner to host an event. I would recommend an outdoor range over an indoor range, unless the indoor range can be set aside specifically for your group. Back in North Carolina, here where I am now, my home range at the time, they reserved lanes and put us together next to each other for our church group to come shoot every month. This event that I did in Texas for my church a few weeks ago, I contacted the owner of the range. I negotiated a rate and a time when we could come out. I reserved a bay for the afternoon. I communicated that to the members, and all of it was taken care of. So we were all together in the same bay at the same time. An outdoor range, there's just something about being outdoors too that is there's something about it that is very different from being indoors. It's not as loud, it's not as intimidating. You don't have the issue with the buildup of particulates in the air that you have to worry about breathing or getting on your skin. But just being out in the open air, out in the sunshine, and the fresh air, and not having that closed, loud environment, especially for new shooters or young shooters, that loud noise can be very jarring. So if you can be outdoors at all, I would recommend that instead of an indoor range. I would recommend a range where you have memberships over, say, a private piece of property. In my case, we used the range, my home range, Mission 160 Tactical in Whitewright, Texas, and they have a waiver that we signed, and we had a range fee that we paid. Now, going to another church member's property and going out to shoot has its benefits in that you may not have a range fee, or you may not have conflicts with other range members, for example, that you have to negotiate to try to get a good time. Those things are beneficial, but the advantage of having a professional range to go to is, one, that you have an address where you can direct emergency personnel. You also have, or should have, ample parking and facilities and that sort of thing. When you're talking about somebody's house, it's a little bit different. You want to make sure that if you go to somebody's private property, that it's easily accessible by emergency personnel. You want to make sure that they have facilities, for example, for people to use the bathroom, first aid. You want to make sure that it has a physical address that you can easily convey to first responders in case there's an emergency. And you also want to make sure that your waiver, the waiver that I mentioned before, indemnifies the property owner against any liability as well, because they're going to be accepting some risk in allowing the shooting events to take place on their property. The next thing I would recommend is make sure that you clearly communicate everything to the congregation to make sure that they know what all the details are. Make sure they know when and where the event's going to take place, the address information for the range, who to contact for more information, what the range fees are going to be, if any. If there are any restrictions on the types of firearms that are going to be allowed, make sure that you clearly communicate that. And if you have any age limits, make sure that those are understood. If shooters are expected to sign a waiver, and they should be, then you need to make sure that they know that in advance, and that you collect that information, and that you're going to collect their range fees in advance of allowing them to shoot. Now, I would recommend that you send out the waivers in advance by email, or print them out and hand them out to people who are interested, after church. Then make sure that all of those are collected, and that everything's accounted for, and all the range fees are collected before anybody starts shooting when you get to the range. Now, the fourth point is, and this sort of ties in with what I was just talking about collecting waivers and collecting range fees. Somebody's got to be in charge of all this, and that somebody is probably going to be you. If you're organizing it, arranging it, if you're announcing it, you're the person you're in charge. It's up to you. So for the outing that I mentioned, for example, that person was me. I arranged to reserve the bay at my range. I negotiated the rate for the event. I collected the money and all the signed waivers, and I was in charge at the range as well. I had vouched for the group. I made arrangements. I'm an IDPA certified safety officer, so I was responsible for safety at the event as well. So it's not just the administrative stuff. Somebody needs to be responsible for the safety aspect and organization at the event as it's taking place. And if you're that person, if you're the person who's in charge, and if you are the one who's responsible, just don't plan on doing a whole lot of shooting during that event. Speaking of safety, that's the next point. Make sure that the event is safely organized and safely run. So for this event, for example, and here's what I would recommend that you do, especially if you don't really know a lot about the people who are joining you at this event. We set up a table on one side of the bay that was for guns. So everybody, when they got there, you unloaded your gun, you opened it, locked the slide open, you set it on the table with the barrel pointed at the side of the bay into the berm in a generally safe direction. On another table away from the guns, we kept all the magazines and all the ammunition. So you never have loaded guns or ammunition anywhere near the guns. It's an added security feature. It's an added safety feature to make sure that you never have an accident. You just never mix the two. And you make it clear as well that nobody is going to be fondling the firearms. Nobody's going to be handling them unless you're under supervision of whoever is in charge of safety. In that case, it was me, or when you're at the firing line. Now, before we started shooting, we started with a standard safety briefing, which I gave out, which was, the same kind of safety briefing that you would have at the beginning of any training class or at the beginning of any competitive match. You go over the range rules, you go over the 4 rules of gun safety, you make sure everybody knows where the first aid kits are, you make sure that they know, you have the address of the range posted, preferably somewhere close to the first aid kits. Make it clear that where this information is located so that it can be easily conveyed to first responders. If someone has to call 911, go over with them how to call 911, for example. If someone accidentally shoots themselves at one of these events, the last thing you want is for another panicked member of your group to call 911 and say, there's been a shooting. You want the first person to show up to be somebody who can quickly render first aid and transport the injured people or person to the hospital. So, make sure that when calling 911, you convey, we're at a shooting range, we've had an accident, please send an ambulance. Check and see if you have any doctors or physicians or anybody with any medical experience or medical training in the group, and find out and identify who those people are before you get shooting as well. And make sure that those people or that person, if there are any in your group, know where the first aid kits are. Explain any relevant range commands and why you're going to be using them. For example, cease fire or stop, and explain that, what this means and who can use them and what happens or what is supposed to happen when somebody calls this out. For example, I made it clear that anybody can yell cease fire if they see something unsafe or something dangerous, and at that point, everyone is supposed to stop shooting immediately and put the guns down. And finally, keep it simple. Don't try to do anything elaborate, especially for your first outing. Keep it very straightforward and simple, and explain up front at the end of your safety briefing exactly what it is you're going to be doing that day, so that people don't just sort of make it up as they go and decide, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I want to go do this now. Make sure that you have a plan for how the day is going to go, and don't make it real complicated. Keep it simple, especially, like I said, especially for that first outing. Let me give you an idea how this went for us, and then you can sort of adapt to your own needs. I created 3 shooting positions with tables. You could do this with barrels. I set up 3 targets and 3 tables. You could do this at 10 or 15 yards. And then behind each of the tables, about 5 yards behind each table, was another table or a barrel. And this is the way it was going to work. I decided it was going to be a show and tell. Everybody was bringing their own guns. And when I basically told them, handguns are fine, 22s are fine, even 22 rifles are fine for this first outing. We're not going to do anything like ARs or long-range shooting, anything like that. So everyone brought their own handguns. So what we did was, I had 3 different people pick guns. I said, all right, hey, you over here, which gun do you want to shoot? All right, you over here, which gun do you want to shoot? Hey, you, which gun do you want to shoot? And we had 3 people pick off of their table where all the guns were laid out. And then they grabbed the gun that they chose, and they came forward with me, and they picked a table, and they set their gun down on that table, and they waited. I then went and retrieved magazines for each of those guns and gave them 2 magazines each with 10 rounds each. And the reason I chose 10 rounds was this. Even though their magazines might hold 15 or 18 rounds, I wanted everybody to shoot the same amount. And some of the guns held more bullets than others, right? The 22s maybe were limited to 10. The 45s might be limited to 9 or 10 rounds. So I tried to make sure that everybody got to shoot the same amount and that everybody started and finished about the same time. So you got 2 magazines for each gun. Then I took 2 more magazines for each gun, loaded to 10 rounds each, and those were set on the tables or the barrels that were behind the firing line 5 yards back. Those were the magazines that would be used for the next group of shooters. So then I called out the standard IDPA range command, ranges going hot, eyes and ears, which I had explained to everybody meant put your eye protection on and your ear protection on. We're getting ready to start shooting. At that point, I confirmed that everybody had their eye and ear protection on, and then I turned to the 3 people at the line and I said, load and make ready. And I had explained to them what this meant, and what this means is take your first magazine or your first speed loader or whatever it is and go ahead and load the firearm. Do not begin shooting. Go ahead and load. Once they had done that and I had confirmed that they were all ready and their fingers were off the trigger and they were handling the guns properly, I said, if you are ready, you may begin. And they were able to shoot and reload at their own pace. And when they finished with their 20 rounds, I had instructed them that they were to lock the gun open so that I could confirm that the gun was empty, and then to set the gun down on the table with the slide or the cylinder open. Once they had all 3 finished shooting, they took their empty magazines, they returned to the back, they reloaded their magazines, and 3 more shooters came forward to shoot the same 3 guns. This way, everybody got to shoot all the guns that we had. And basically what we did was, once everybody had shot those 3 guns, we brought 3 more out. And we basically rotated through and made it a show and tell so that everybody got to shoot everybody else's guns. Now, we had a couple of curmudgeons who were like, I'm going to shoot my gun. and I had to go and take a gun off the table and let them bring their gun to the front. They didn't want to play show and tell. They wanted to practice with their own gun. Fine. So you accommodate that. And you get a sense for who's safe and who's not, and you know who to watch carefully and who not, and you get to figure out who's going to be able to help you and who's not. And it worked out nicely. So we ran through, I don't know how many different guns, and everybody got to shoot a little bit, and then people started bringing their own targets out and changing targets and putting different things up. And then once we had done that for several hours and everybody was pretty well familiarized with all the different guns, we decided we would shoot a plate rack, and I would introduce them to competition. So I had a timer and a score sheet that I had adapted from one that I found online, and I recruited somebody to help me keep score. And then I explained to them how it was going to work. And it was basically, we're going to run 2 magazines, and you're going to run 10 rounds, and you're going to knock these 6 plates down as fast as you can, and that's your score. And then we're going to penalize you for any you leave standing. And so we shot through, plate racks and let about 6 or 7 people, I think it was about 7 people shot the plate rack. And then we posted scores after it was all done. And at the end, everybody was excited and wanted to do it all again. And we've got one planned for next month. So all in all, it was a safe day and a successful outing. And I got an idea of just who was capable of doing what and what the level of experience and safety was for each person. And if you just keep it simple for that first outing, then you can expand on it in the future. And I think our next outing is probably going to be less of the show and tell and more of the competition. You could do an event where it's all kids, bring your kids out and then have the parents work with their children at the line. I would encourage you to do something similar to keep it simple. And maybe instead of, depending on the age of the children, maybe not paper targets, but maybe steel targets so that they get that instant feedback of hitting the steel. I know that worked really well with my daughter. But then again, keeping it simple and keeping it safe is the best way to do these things. Instead of just, all right, we're going to come out to the range and we're just going to shoot to our heart's content. You run a lot more risk if you just let it be a free-for-all and without any controls. Keep it organized and safe and simple, and you'll have a lot more fun, and you'll go home with the same number of holes that you arrived with. I hope that helped. If you have any other questions about how to organize an event, how to do it, how to set it up, or any of the things that we've done with our shooting club or have planned for our shooting club, stop by the feedback page, armedlutheran.us/feedback. Send us an email or a voice message, or call our hotline 888-571-5552 and leave a voicemail, and we'd love to hear from you, and I'll be sure to get back to you with answers to your questions. And I hope your church shooting event is as fun as ours was. We'll be back with more right after this, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio. And that's going to wrap it up for this Tarheel State Road Trip edition of Armed Lutheran Radio. Thank you to all my contributors for their efforts in providing us awesome content again this week. Thank you for listening, for downloading and subscribing. And be sure to join us again next week for episode 80 when we're back in North Texas. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.